1, 2. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday evening lesson once again. We're carrying on with Bala Slum's article, and we're doing the freedom, and hopefully we'll finish this article this week. So it's been since we've been doing this article, so hopefully we'll get this week finish this off this lesson. But as you know, this is quite an important article, and it's one of the foundations, one of the pillars actually of Bala Slum's article, where we can actually discover where our freedom really is. So I'm not going to re-summarize the whole article because we've been over it quite a few times. So we'll get smashing. If you have any questions, as usual, you can ask them through. And once we finish this article, then we'll move on to a new one next week. All right, so there we go. So we're going to start with the subheading 2 creations. A man, B, a living soul. And I presume you guys have the link to the article, both on YouTube, okay, and on the site. So let's get smashing. And if you have any questions, shoot them through. And we won't start a new article today. Whenever we finish this, we'll finish it off and see how we go. So 2 creations, A, man, B, a living soul. From the above, we can clearly understand the verse, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Here we find 2 creations. A, man himself. B, the living soul itself. And the verse says that in the beginning, man was created as dust of the ground, a collection of molecules in which resides the essence of man, meaning his will to receive. That force, the will to receive, is present in every element of reality, as we've explained above. Also, all 4 types, the still, vegetative, animate, and speaking, emerged from them. In that respect, man has no advantage over any part of creation. And this is the meaning of the verse in the words, dust of the ground. However, we have already seen that this force, called will to receive, cannot exist without dressing and acting in a desired object. And this action is called life. And accordingly, we find that before man has arrived at the human forms of reception of pleasure, which differ from those of other animals, he is still considered a lifeless, dead person. This is because his will to receive has no place in which to dress and manifest his actions, which are the manifestations of life. So this is an important part. We should just go over it quickly. So up to now, he's saying that, well, we were created as body, and that body is a will to receive. So when we're relating to ourselves, there are 2 aspects to us. One, the person himself, the man himself, and second is the living soul itself. So first, we have the body, all right, the man himself. Okay, this is what we are. So we were beginning created as dust of the ground, and dust of the ground is just a term for it. As a collection of molecules, which is the essence of man, which is the will to receive. So this is what we are. We're just a desire to receive pleasure, and that's all. And this is what we are initially. And the soul part, well, he's not really getting into it at the moment. He just says there are 2 parts to it. He'll explain to us what that is. But at in the beginning, he just says a bunch of molecules, a bag of protein, and our essence is the will to receive pleasure. And this is how we're done. That's it. So it's because the whole of reality is actually the will to receive. Every element in reality has that essence. So the whole of reality is actually a will to receive. And since we feel the whole of reality inside ourselves, inside our desire, actually, the whole reality has to be composed of that, because we're feeling everything in our desire to receive. So this will to receive cannot exist without dressing and acting in a desired object, and this is called life. So for us, life is actually having a desire and getting it fulfilled. Okay, that's what it is. So as far as we're concerned, this is what we're living for. And the whole of humanity is actually running after their desire to receive. So everybody wants fulfillment in life. And this is what our essence is. And accordingly, we find that before man has arrived at the human forms of reception of pleasure, which differ from those of other animals, he's still considered a lifeless dead person. This is because his will to receive has no place in which to dress and manifest his actions, which are the manifestations of life. So the reason actually human beings die is because we're actually considered dead. Our life doesn't have much meaning if we live it as a desire to receive pleasure, because pleasure and the desire always cancel each other out. So let's say you're hungry and you get your best favorite food. Let's say you start eating and the pleasure you get from your favorite food starts to decrease bite after bite. So the desire and the fulfillment always cancel each other out. So this is why the whole of humanity is in depression, because we don't know where to get pleasure from, because the pleasure is always fleeting away. So this is a big problem, and this is why we have, what do we have? This is why we have humanity right now in a big mess. We don't know what to do with our lives, how to move forward in life. The young generation, they absolutely don't want anything to do with the way we used to live life, so they're looking for something new. Nobody sees a bright future, nobody has any aspirations, nothing, because we're just lost at the moment. And you can actually start to feel that in more and more people with the coronavirus as well. And as you know, a second virus also came out. So in case you haven't heard about it, there's another virus out from China. And the coronavirus, seemingly China was free of the coronavirus, but the coronavirus is now back in China. So this whole thing is just a merry-go-round. There is no solution to it. Plus, the whole world, as you might also know, is going through natural disasters, catastrophes. There are floods all over the world. Last year there were fires all over the world. Now it's floods all over the world. It is just big chaos. Why? Because nature wants to balance us out. So our life, the way we're living it, is not considered life. This is why we're born, we live, and most of the time our life is just a misery. Most of the time, if you just did a calculation, a simple calculation, when you were happy and the times when you were miserable, it'll be a really disappointing measurement, right? And then we just get old and end up dead, all right? So there's really no point for humanity to carry on living in this way, and this is why it's called, if you're living in this situation, you're called dead. This is the meaning of the verse, and breathed. Let's read a bit more. Into his nostrils the breath of life, which is the general form of reception suitable for humans. The word breath comes from the word placing the ground for him, which is like value. And the origin of the word breath is understood from the sentence, the Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty has given me life. And the word soul has the same syntax structure as the words missing or accused and accused from, it basically means the word for soul. And the meaning of the words and breathe into his nostrils is that he instills a soul in his internality and appreciation of life, which is the sum of the forms that are worthy of reception into his will to receive. So this thing called soul needs to be given to a person. If we had one, we'd feel it. All right. So our major problem in life is a lot of people out there in the world believe they have a soul. If you had one, you'd feel it. All right? So the Kabbalists are saying the soul is a way to perceive the Creator. So if I'm not perceiving the Creator, I'm not perceiving the truth behind reality and how the forces in reality are acting in us, then how can I really say I have a soul? I just have a body and I end up dead with this body. So a person needs to be breathed into himself, this thing called a soul. And this thing called a soul then makes us worthy of receiving whatever we're going to receive. He hasn't talked about it yet, but he's saying it makes us, this is what makes us human, man. So until we actually attain a soul, we're not even considered a man, we're just considered an animal. Then that force, the will to receive, enclosed in his molecules, has found a place in which to dress and act. Meaning, in those forms of reception that he had obtained from the Creator, and this action is called life, as we have explained above. So when we are clothed with the attributes of the Creator, that form of living is called life. And that's what life, according to the wisdom of Kabbalah, is, because you then begin to live in a higher level of perception. And that is what we're actually after. All right, so we need to attain that. And this attainment is called life. And the verse ends, and man became a living soul. This means that since the will to receive has begun to act by the measure of those forms of reception, life instantly manifested in it, and it became a living soul. So as soon as our essence, the will to receive, starts to act like, similar to the Creator, then it's considered we have a soul, and because we're similar to him, we can actually exist in his reality. Just like kids, when they grow up, they become similar to us, and they can now live in a grown-up's world. Until then, they live in a child's world. So same with humanity. We need to grow up, attain this attribute or this thing called the soul, and learn to live a proper life. However, prior to the attainment of those forms of reception, although the force of the will to receive had been imprinted in him, it is still considered a lifeless body, since it has no place in which to appear and to manifest in action. So until we attain a soul in the wisdom of Kabbalah and spirituality, we're not even considered alive. And this is why our destiny is to die. When I say our destiny, I'm talking about the body. So the body, one way or another, everybody's going to die in this body. So life, the way Kabbalists are talking about, is to actually live in a perception which is called the soul. And this soul a person has to build, has to attain while he's living in this world. It's not going to happen after death, like religions have people believe. Nothing happens after death, and nobody has proven that it has happened after death. So we don't need to believe in fairy tales. Okay. As we've seen above, although man's essence is only the will to receive, it is still taken as half of a whole, as it must clothe in a reality that comes its way. For that reason, it and the image of possessions it depicts are literally one, for otherwise it would not be able to exist for even a moment. So here, in the desire to receive, in our will to receive, we're like half-half. So as we ascend the rungs of the ladder into spirituality, until we completely attain spirituality, we are still bound by this world. So in corporeality, a person still needs to continue. This is why a Kabbalist, although they've attained spirituality, still need to participate in this reality, because this reality is called the will to receive for itself. And as they transform it as the will to receive in order to bestow, they still need to participate in this world. So this is why half, until a person completely corrects and turns all its desire to receive into bestowing attitude, the bestowing attribute, then this world is still a necessity. So we have to clothe in reality until we completely correct our desire to receive from egoism into altruism. Therefore, when the machine of the body is at its peak, that is until his middle age, his ego stands upright in all the height imprinted in him at birth. Because of that, he feels within him a large and powerful measure of the will to receive. In other words, he craves great wealth and honor and anything that comes his way. This is so because of the perfection of man's ego, which attracts shapes of structures and concepts that it dresses in and sustains itself through them. So as we grow up in life in corporeal reality, our ego increases. So we come to a certain age where we feel like we want to go out there and get everything. Okay, normally, when you were young, right? You want to go do everything and that's it. You think the whole world's yours. And obviously life slaps you around a little bit, and then you get disheartened as you grow older and older and older, and you stop dreaming, as they say. Okay, you start to get real. Okay, why? Because that's how we grow. So our ego grows, develops, and then life brings us to shattered dreams. Let's see what else he's talking about here. But when half of his life is through, begin the days of decline, which by their content are his dying days. This is because a person does not die in an instant, just as he did not receive his life in an instant. Rather, his candle, being his ego, withers and dies bit by bit. And along with it, die the images of the possessions he wishes to receive. He begins to relinquish many possessions he had dreamed of in his youth, and he gradually relinquishes great possessions according to his decline over the years. Finally, in his truly old days, when the shadow of death hovers over all his being, a person finds himself in times of no appeal, since his will to receive, his ego has withered away. Only a tiny spark of it remains, hidden from the eye, from clothing in some possession. Therefore, there is no appeal or hope in those days for any image of reception. Thus, we have proven that the will to receive, along with the image of the object expected to be received, are one and the same thing, and their manifestation is equal. Their stature is equal, and so is the length of their lives. However, there's a significant distinction here in the form of the yielding at the time of the decline of life. That yielding is not a result of satiation, like a person who relinquishes food when he's saturated, but a result of despair. In other words, when the ego begins to die during the days of decline, it senses its own weakness and approaching death. Therefore, a person lets go and gives up on the dreams and hopes of his youth. Observe carefully the difference between that and the yielding due to satiation, which causes no grief and cannot be called partial death, but is like a worker who completed his work. Indeed, a relinquishment out of despair is full of pain and sorrow, and can therefore be called partial death. So he explains it rather nicely here. As we grow up, our ego is growing. In our midlife, well, not quite midlife, but let's say, mid-20s, I don't know, or early 20s, from 20 years onwards, let's say. We want to go out and conquer the world. And as we get older, we just understand that we can't be satisfied in life. So people stop wanting things, stop doing things. They feel they're tired. So they don't want to chase their desire to receive. They don't want to go there. And we're going to see this with humanity. Humanity will just stop tasting life. they're not going to find taste in anything. This coronavirus is going to knock us all out. It will stop us from tasting life. We won't want to do anything. So normally a person gets old. As he gets older, what stops wanting things is, waiting to go, basically. All right, and that's it. And gradually, as his desire to receive dies off, he dies off as well. And now, as humanity, we've entered a new state with the coronavirus. So the coronavirus will teach the whole of humanity to be more balanced in life. And that balance is actually what's going to be called happiness. We're going to find happiness in balancing ourselves out. We should have done this earlier. However, we haven't. As humanity, we haven't. And if you don't get things done early, when you first get the message, then life will teach you the hard way. And this is what's going to happen to us right now. So we're going to be learning the hard way. So up to here, we've finished. Let's see if there are any questions coming along. Francesco's asking, with all these disasters for humankind, where does Kabbalah come in? For what reason? What will it teach us? Well, all the suffering that humanity has been receiving for thousands of years is to push humanity to ask the question, the meaning of life. And all the sufferings we're getting globally right now, you'll see that we're not going to have any breaks. One thing after another, we're really going to feel like life is squeezing us. And this will actually prompt in us changes. Humanity has already gone through a lot of changes through the past few weeks because of this coronavirus. People are going to be more content with less. They'll be less fussy. They'll want less. So the whole world is going to actually, the whole of humanity is going through an inner process right now. And all of these natural disasters are helping humanity to change. Obviously, we don't want disasters to persuade humanity to change. So this is where the wisdom of Kabbalah comes in. The wisdom of Kabbalah says, listen, we have to change. There's no doubt about it. We should do it in a smart way. And the smart way is to study life. We need to study human nature. We need to study the purpose of life. What are we doing here? The laws of nature and the laws of human nature, and why we can't be happy in the current state we're in, but how can we be happy in a different way of life? So this is why life is bringing us bitter lemons, and there's no way to make lemonade out of them. It's just going to be really bitter. Simply not just because of natural disasters. We'll see that capitalism is just dying off. It's been dying off for the past 30 years. They've just been patching it. It's just a big balloon, and it's just about to pop. So it's not going anywhere. Life is not going anywhere. The economy isn't going anywhere. Natural disasters on the one hand, viruses, human depression, all these things. Even before the virus, human depression was up to 50% of the population. So this is huge. The kids are not happy. Children are not happy. Teenagers don't know what to do with their lives. Young adults, they don't want to carry on living their lives like their parents do. Nobody wants to do anything, achieve anything, attain anything. And this is because the whole of humanity is lost. We've got no direction. And this lack of direction is a big confusion and a cause for depression. So life is actually doing us a favor with all the coronavirus and natural disasters, because life is telling us, well, you guys are not willing to change because you don't know what to do. Well, I'm gonna make sure you guys change. How? Well, first of all, stop what you're doing. Stop everything. And that's what life is teaching us, to stop everything. So the businesses have stopped. A lot of people have lost their jobs. So on the other hand, we've got natural disasters. So there's all of a sudden the future is grim for everyone, for the poor and the rich. Okay, it's grim for everyone. So this is why all of a sudden, people want to cause changes. This is why we have riots all over the place. Why is everybody rioting right now? So all of these things are very important, simply because humanity is going through a change. And as the economies collapse around the world, and they will, humanity will need to find a better way to live, where we're socially conscious and more integrated and more connected as humanity. And we'll discover that we don't have to run after all these stupid things in life, which are mostly redundant. So the Wisdom of Kabbalah explains to us how we can actually be happy. So from these painful situations, we can actually consider these as birth pains. We can give birth to a new humanity through all these bad experiences. So it won't teach us anything, but it'll prompt us to ask the question, what do we need to do? What's the meaning of life? That's what suffering does. And the Wisdom of Kabbalah explains, gives all of us an answer. Can you spare a few moments and explain the egoism of the organs I read in the books? It says organs are part of the 613 desires of this world. Well, the 613 desires, the whole body is a desire to receive. Right? So our essence is a desire to receive pleasure. And it has many parts to it, just like our body has organs and tendons and all kinds of connections, blood veins, muscles, tissue. We're a really complex being as a body. And the desire to receive is also a complex desire to receive. It has many parts to it. And this is why the desire to receive is also called the body. Obviously, in Kabbalistic books, when they're talking about a body, they're not talking about our flesh. They're not talking about this sack of bones. They're talking about the will to receive. That's called the body. And it has desires that it needs to correct. Now, we can't relate that to our humanly body, our worldly body, because we don't have 613 desires. I mean, how many desires do we have? We've got desire for food, sex, money, power, knowledge, and that's it. We've got a handful of desires. We don't have a lot of desires. So in spirituality, it's a different ball game. And this is why in spirituality, we have a lot of desires, and these desires need to be converted from egoism into altruism. This is why our world is really just like a speck of dust. There's nothing really to talk about. Our pleasures are minute. They're always evaporating. The pleasure is always evaporating. And this is why because we only have a few desires, we don't have any other desires, then we just get suffocated in them, running after the same things all the time. So it really, it really stresses us, strains us, makes us tired running around. So they're different things. The 613 desires of the body relate to spirituality. Okay, and these things will be revealed when a person enters spirituality. Before we enter there's nothing really to talk about those 613 desires. Was there ever a generation where nature equaled happiness with humankind? I think not, because humanity's development has always been through suffering, and suffering means the existence of egoism. So humans are different from animals, plants, and the still level because we have egoism, and it's the pushing force of human development. And human development means suffering, because we always develop from suffering. There's no other way. So we've never been equal to nature. We've been close to nature. Previous generations were much closer to nature Therefore, they had, sometimes they had, let's say, more stressless life. So, but as humanity gradually developed more and more, and the egoism in humanity increased, thus the suffering also increased. So there is no other way. Advancement means we're currently in a state where we're suffering. So we want to move forward. If you think about it, that's what human advancement is. Suffering in our current situation, and we need to do something else. So can't really say we've equaled ourselves to nature. We've been close in the past generations, and now we have to consciously equalize ourselves with the laws of nature. If humanity does not participate consciously, it will just continue suffering. It could even be through wars like the Third World War. Like a Third World War, we've been through the first, the second, and if humanity does not participate, does not take the reins of development into its own hands, then it's just extending and prolonging the suffering until it comes to the goal. There is no other way. Humanity has to come to the purpose of life. Two ways to go, like we've studied before, either through the path of suffering or by conscious development. P. Green is asking, would a Kabbalist who attained complete adhesion with God but came back to this world see the disasters we experience but see them as good? That's right. A Kabbalist who attains the whole of spirituality cannot see the Creator doing something bad. Why? Because all his measurement, from the moment actually a person starts ascending in spirituality, he starts to see everything towards the purpose of life. So whatever happens in life, although he may not understand it or he may not justify the Creator at the moment, what does happen is he begins to measure things towards a certain goal, the purpose of creation. So the higher you get in spirituality, all the horrific things that could be happening in this world could be justified by a Kabbalist according to his level. Because at the end of the day, all of these disasters, all of the suffering humanity is going through is for what? It's to bring us to perfection, bring us. A Kabbalist really feels sorry for the suffering of humanity. So Kabbalists for centuries have always been trying to help teach them how they can grow consciously rather than being pushed about by life. And that's what we try to do here in Bnei Baruch as well. So we're trying to help the whole of humanity try to understand why we're going through all these things so that we don't have to go through them ever again. Francesca is asking again, if a Kabbalist can change reality, why didn't they change the root of today's problems? Well, Kabbalists actually have changed many things, but everybody is responsible for their part in correction. So a Kabbalist is also responsible for his part. So he needs to, like everybody else, correct himself, his root of the soul. But the important thing we should understand here is whenever a person corrects himself, he corrects himself in others as well, because all of us are actually integrated with the whole of humanity. So if I correct myself, I correct the me in everybody else in the world. So they're actually contributing. So when we study spirituality as well, we're really contributing to the development of humanity in spirituality. But at the end of the day, every individual must give their own effort to attain. Just like our fathers can't finish our school, right? I can't to go and take an exam that I'm supposed to take. Right, I'm going to school, so I got to pass the exam. I got to take the exam. So the same with the Kabbalists. They try to teach us as best they can throughout generations, and this is what they've done for years. They've tried to teach us, and advance us so that we can actually grow consciously. All right, let's read a little bit more so we can finish this article. Otherwise, we're not going to finish the article this week either. So let's read a bit more. Freedom of death. Okay, sounds a bit traumatic, but let's see what it's trying to explain to us. Now, after all that we've learned, we find a way to truly understand the words of our sages when they said harut, carved on the stones. Do not pronounce it harut as carved, but rather herut as freedom, for they have been liberated from the angel of death. It's been explained in the articles Matan Torah and the Arvut that prior to the giving of the Torah, they had assumed the relinquishment of any private property to the extent expressed in the words a kingdom of priests, and the purpose of the whole of creation to cleave unto him in equivalence of form with him. As he bestows and does not receive, they too will bestow and not receive. This is the last degree of adhesion expressed in the words a holy nation, as it is written in the articles in the end of the article Arvut. So when we're talking about a holy nation, we're talking about a group of people who study the wisdom of Kabbalah. Eventually, the whole world will come to this. The whole world will want to relinquish all the unnecessary things they have in life. And like I said, the virus is actually a good example, because this is what the virus is causing right now. We're just getting rid of all the unnecessary stuff in life. So that's one thing. We've studied Matan Torah and the Arvut before. So being free from the angel of death is actually being free from this bodily life cycle of constantly suffering and dying. That's what it means when it's talking about the angel of death. At the end of the day, an angel of death is just a force in nature. Just like life is a force, death is also a force. It's an impression that we get in life. So in order for us to be free from this, we have to adhere, change our nature, and adapt ourselves to the nature of the Creator. And once we can do that, that's called adhesion with the Creator. Accordingly, we can then perceive our life in His reality, and that's called life. I've already brought you to realize that man's essence, meaning his selfishness, defined as the will to receive, is only half a thing, and can only exist when clothed in some image of a possession or hope of possession. For only then is our matter complete and can be called man's essence. Thus, when the children of Israel were rewarded with complete devekut in that holy occasion, their vessels of reception were completely emptied of any worldly possession, and they were cleaved unto him, which is the Creator, in equivalence of form. This means that they did not have any desire for any self-possession, but only to the extent that they could bestow contentment, so their Maker would delight in them. So what does that mean? The children of Israel means anyone who's directed to the Creator. Israel, from the word Yashar El, straight to God, straight to the Creator. So anybody who directs himself to attain the attribute of the Creator, and this can be anyone in the world, okay? It can be anybody on the planet. It's got nothing to do with your religion or nationality. Then when this person reaches the equivalence of form, then he is above his desires and he's only living in order to bestow contentment to the Creator, just like the Creator is bestowing upon us to give us contentment. So this equivalence of form is called freedom from the angel of death. And since their will to receive had clothed in an image of that object, it had clothed in it and bonded with it into complete oneness. Therefore, they were certainly liberated from the angel of death, for death is necessarily an absence and negation of the existence of a certain object. But only while there's a spark that wishes to exist for its own pleasure is it possible to say about it that the spark does not exist, because it has become absent and died. So initially, when we live in this world, we're actually living just for a spark of light, a spark of pleasure, like eating ice cream. You know, the first lick tastes the best. But you start licking, and after a few licks, that ice cream doesn't taste anymore. Why? Because your taste buds are over it. You're over it. So you're just eating it to finish it off. And this is how it is with all the pleasures we have in life. They're just fleeting away as we consume. We're actually consuming ourselves, actually. Our whole life is being consumed by consumption. However, when he achieves the aim of creation and the creator receives pleasure from him, since his will is done, man's essence, which clothes in his contentment, is granted complete eternity like him. Thus, he has been rewarded with freedom from the angel of death. This is the meaning of the words, freedom from the angel of death. And harut on the stones, do not pronounce it as carved, but rather pronounce it as chirut, which means freedom. So what we have to do is advance in our spirituality, come to adhesion with the Creator. And once we get there, what we have to do, then once we get there, we're actually free from the angel of death. Then we come to live in the reality of the Creator, just like the Creator does. And that's called perfection and wholeness. And this is where all of humanity has to get to. And as you can see now, we're all being squeezed into a new way of living. That new way of living is called settling for less. Okay, and this is what the coronavirus will do. We'll stop going out to all these cafes and pubs and restaurants. We're going to stop all the traveling. Okay, and many people are now unemployed. That unemployment rate is going to increase. Unemployment increasing means demand will decrease. A decrease in demand will send prices down, and a lowering of the prices, in essence, will create shock waves in the economy. Okay, because nobody's there to buy them. So what are you going to do? So the world is going to be faced with a lot of economic problems. This is why capitalism will end up dead. Okay, and humanity will have to find a new way of existing, living, which is more compatible to the laws of nature and compatible to the purpose of life, because life is pushing us to get there. All right, and that does conclude our article. So maybe just a few words. Next week we're going to carry on with another article. And let's see, let me just point that one out. So this was the freedom article. We're going to next week carry on with the last generation. Okay, the article, The Last Generation by Baba Salam. And I will actually give the link to the guys right now. Okay, so they can share it on the email for next week. We'll start the last edition by Baba Salam again. And the reason we have to start looking at these articles is because humanity is actually going through this process of change. So we have to understand how we're supposed to live. Okay, what are we supposed to do in life, as ourselves? Because the biggest problem now facing humanity is how are we going to, what are we going to do? All right, so the future is all questions, well, what are we going to do? So all of the countries, if you look at them, all of them are desperately trying to go back to the state that was before the virus. Okay, everybody's trying to go back to before the virus state. And in human history, we've never gone back in time. And a few more months and you'll see humanity will not want to go back. Will not want to go back to pre-virus era. That's it. It won't want to. This whole virus thing, plus the natural disasters, the social unrest in many countries right now, and there'll be much, much more of them. All of these are going to be causing inside of us an attitude change to life. We're going to have a lot of time to change, to stop and to think and to wonder about our lives. So humanity cannot go back, will not go back. Capitalism will not come back. It's right now, it's just stretching out the last few miles, and that's it. Game over. So humanity will be forced to come to balance. So it's important for us to go through these articles and see how humanity needs to be organized. Okay, so let's take a few more questions before we finish up. Philosophers see the effects of the coronavirus. Is it possible a Kabbalist to obtain complete adhesion with God, not see death and severe illness from it? Certainly, even if we all, let's say, right now, you started to change yourself from egoism to bestowal, you would also not be influenced by the virus. Because at the end of the day, think about it, okay? Think about it. It sounds a little crazy, but it's not crazy. We are living in nature, all right? So if a person is balanced with nature, it can't get harmed by nature. You can only get harmed by nature if there is some contradiction between you, some imbalance between you and nature. That's how it is. This is why it's the law of balance. So you don't even have to be a Kabbalist for that. A person who's acting according to the laws of nature, who is making sure and he behaves in a way that doesn't cause harm to others, and is balanced with life, is only taking what he or she needs in life, and also helping society with the rest, then that person is living according to the laws of nature, and that person won't get sick either. If we all started wearing our masks in order not to spread the virus, even though I may not have the virus, but I'm wearing it because I'm thinking of other people, even that will help us not to catch the virus. Why? Because of our attitude change. The whole of creation runs on a thought of creation. So when the whole of reality is running on laws, okay, it means there's a thought behind it. And that thought is acting. So as that thought is acting, and I'm acting with the flow of that thought, that's also enough for me to be safe. And last question from Francesco. But the downfall phase starts with the poor. The rich will be the last to suffer. Is that correct in nature's way? Well, you could also say the higher a person is, the greater the fall, right? So there's everything has two sides to it. The poor have been suffering for decades, right? So it's not like they're suffering new. They've been suffering with poverty for years. And the virus, as you can see, is not really, discerning between who's poor and who's rich. The virus can kill anyone and everyone. So everybody's on the same boat. And whoever adapts to the new laws of nature, they get to survive. And those who don't, they get to end up dead. There's no running away from it. It's like a balance in your body. You have something unbalanced in your body, it starts to get sick. This virus is giving us and showing us the same thing. So humanity will have to start thinking about putting itself into balance, and it'll hit everyone. It'll hit everyone. Melike Chichek is asking, I think there's a problem on the internet. It's just keep cutting. Is anyone else having the same issue? Is there a problem with the internet? Okay, so far so good. Okay, so the team here is telling me it's okay. All right, worst case scenario, you can always watch it on the archive, so hopefully it should be good there. In the interim though, we've come to the end of today's lesson. So next week we'll carry on with the last generation, and we'll see you guys all next Tuesday. In the meantime, take care and be safe. All right, don't go around doing crazy things with the virus about. Okay, bye bye.